"You can't be serious, doctor. Look at her. She's staring at the wall. She probably doesn't even know who I am right now." My son Mark was shouting so loud that the vein in his neck looked like a thick blue worm about to burst through his skin. His face was red, a deep, ugly crimson that clashed with the sterile white walls of the medical office. I sat in the leather chair, clutching my purse with both hands, staring vacantly at a diploma hanging slightly crooked on the wall, just to the left of the doctor's head. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch at his shouting. I kept my mouth slightly open, my posture slumped, just the way I had practiced in the mirror for weeks. The doctor, a calm man with gray eyes that seemed to see right through everything, slowly closed the file on his desk. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with a small yellow cloth, taking his time, letting Mark's anger hang in the air like a bad smell. Then he looked up, ignoring Mark, and looked directly at me. There was a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. He turned to my son and spoke softly. "Mr. Henderson, I have reviewed the scans. I have reviewed the cognitive tests. I have observed your mother for days. There is absolutely no plaque buildup, no atrophy. Your mother does not have Alzheimer's. In fact, based on her performance over the last month, I'd say the only thing she suffers from is a surplus of talent. She doesn't have dementia, sir. She has a PhD in acting." But wait, how did we get here? How did I end up in that cold office, watching my only son unravel while I played the role of a lifetime? Let me start from the beginning, from the day my heart actually broke, even if my face didn't show it. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray, heavy afternoon where the sky looks like a wet wool blanket pressing down on the rooftops. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one with the floral pattern that had faded from years of sunlight hitting it through the bay window. The house smelled of dust and cardboard. It wasn't the smell of home anymore. It was the smell of leaving. Mark was standing by the fireplace, holding a roll of packing tape that screeched every time he pulled a strip off. That sound, that sharp, tearing noise, felt like it was ripping right through my eardrums. He was moving too fast, throwing my porcelain figurines into a box with careless hands. These were figurines I had collected for 40 years, delicate dancers and shepherds, and he was treating them like old potatoes. "Mom, you have to focus," he said, his voice tight with that fake patience people use when they talk to toddlers or idiots. "I told you, we can't keep the house. It's too big. You're forgetting things. Remember last week? You left the garden hose running all night. The yard was a swamp." I hadn't forgotten. I had left it on because the hydrangeas went dying in the heat, and my hip hurt too much to go back out and turn the spigot. But I didn't say that. I just looked at him with watery eyes and nodded slowly, letting my hands tremble just a little bit on the armrest. I don't remember that, Mark," I whispered, making my voice sound thin and brittle. "Exactly," he said, pointing a roll of tape at me like a weapon. "That's exactly why we're doing this. It's dangerous for you here. What if you leave the gas on next time? What if you fall down these stairs? I can't be driving over here every day, Mom. I have the business. I have Sarah and the kids." He didn't look at me when he said it. He was looking at the mantelpiece, specifically at the heavy silver clock that had belonged to his father. He picked it up, weighing it in his hand, assessing its value. I saw the greed in his eyes, brief but undeniable. It wasn't about my safety. It was about the house. It was about the assets. Since my husband died 5 years ago, Mark had been circling like a shark, waiting for a drop of blood in the water. And when I started moving a little slower, forgetting a name here and there, normal things for a woman of 80, he saw his chance. He turned back to me, putting the clock in a box marked Sell. Green Meadows is a great place, Mom. Top of the line. They have activities, they have nurses 24/7. You won't have to worry about cooking or cleaning or bills. It's like a permanent vacation. A vacation, that's what he called it. I looked around the living room. My life was in this room. The rug where he learned to crawl, the table where we ate thousands of dinners, the scratch on the doorframe from when we moved the piano in. He was erasing 60 years of history and packing it into brown cardboard boxes, and he had the audacity to call it a vacation. I felt a fire in my belly, a hot flare of rage that I hadn't felt in years. I wanted to stand up, grab that tape from his hand, and tell him that I was perfectly capable, that I knew exactly what he was doing. I wanted to scream that I had checked my bank statements and noticed the small withdrawals he thought I missed. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't senile, just tired. But I didn't. I stayed in the chair. I let my jaw go slack. I stared past him at the wall, letting my eyes go slightly out of focus. If he wanted a helpless old woman, I would give him the performance of a century. I would let him think he had won, right up until the moment I decided to drop the curtain. I guess you know best, sweetie," I mumbled, picking at a loose thread on my sweater. I'll miss the garden." "You won't even notice," he said, sealing the box with a final violent rip of the tape. "They have a garden there, better than this mess." He checked his watch, a flashy gold thing that cost more than my first car. "Come on, the car is running. The movers will handle the rest of this junk tomorrow. Let's go." Getting up from that chair was the hardest thing I've ever done. My knees popped, a dry cracking sound in the quiet room. I took my cane, the wooden one with the smooth handle worn down by my palm. Mark didn't offer me an arm. He was already at the front door, tapping his foot, checking his phone. I walked slowly through the hallway. I touched the wallpaper one last time. It was peeling slightly at the corner near the kitchen. I remembered the day we put it up, my husband and I, laughing because the paste had gotten in his hair. Now the house felt like a corpse, cold and empty, waiting to be dissected. When I stepped out onto the porch, the air was chilly. The wind bit at my cheeks. Mark's black SUV was idling in the driveway, looking like a hearse. He opened the passenger door for me, but he didn't look me in the eye. "Watch your head," he muttered. I sat in the leather seat. It smelled of new car and stale coffee. As we pulled away, I didn't look back at the house. I couldn't. If I looked back, I would have cried. And Dolores Henderson does not cry when there is work to be done. Instead, I looked at Mark's hands on the steering wheel. He was gripping it tight, his knuckles white. He looked stressed, but also relieved. He thought the hard part was over. He thought he had successfully deposited the problem into a facility where I would fade away quietly, leaving him with the deed to the house and a clear conscience. He turned on the radio to drown out the silence between us. Some loud, thumping music filled the car. "Is the music okay?" he asked, not really caring. I just nodded, staring out the window as the familiar streets of my neighborhood blurred past. The bakery where I bought his birthday cakes, the park where he broke his arm falling off the slide, the school where I cheered for him at graduation. It was all sliding away. We drove for 40 minutes until the suburbs gave way to a more sterile, manicured area. We pulled up to a large brick building with a sign out front, Green Meadows Assisted Living and Memory Care. It looked like a hotel that had lost its soul. The grass was too green, unnatural. The windows were sealed shut. Mark put the car in park and finally looked at me. He put on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a terrifying smile. "We're here, Mom. Your new home." My stomach turned. A knot of fear and nausea twisted in my gut. This was it. The cage. But I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the car's air freshener, artificial pine, and I centered myself. I remembered my training from decades ago, from the university theater group, from life itself. I looked at him, widened my eyes with a look of innocent confusion, and said, "New home? But where are we, Mark? Did we stop for ice cream?" He sighed, a heavy, irritated sound that vibrated against the window glass. "No, Mom, no ice cream. This is where you live now, remember? We talked about this." I let my lip tremble. I let a single tear pool in my eye, but didn't let it fall. "Oh," I whispered. "Oh, I see." He got out and came around to open my door. The air outside smelled of wet mulch and antiseptic. As he guided me toward the sliding glass doors, holding my elbow with a firm grip, I saw a nurse waiting in the lobby with a clipboard. She was wearing blue scrubs and a tired expression. Mark leaned close to me as we walked. "Don't make a scene, Mom. Please, just be good." Be good. Like I was a child. Like I was a dog. I shuffled my feet, leaning heavily on the cane, making myself smaller, frailer. "I'll be good, Mark," I said softly. But inside, my mind was sharp as a diamond. I was recording everything. The code he punched into the keypad at the door, the name on the nurse's badge. The way he handed over my suitcase like it was a bag of trash. He thought he was dropping off a burden. He had no idea he was planting a bomb, and the countdown had just begun. The sliding glass doors hissed shut behind us, cutting off the crisp autumn breeze and replacing it with recycled air that tasted metallic. The silence in the lobby was thick, heavy, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. It didn't smell like a home. It didn't even smell like a hospital. It smelled like pine sol and boiled cabbage, a scent that seemed to seep out of the beige walls themselves. My cane tapped against the linoleum floor, a lonely, hollow sound. Clack, 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 that announced my arrival as the newest inmate. Mark didn't let go of my elbow. His grip was tight, his fingers digging into the loose skin of my arm through my cardigan. He was walking too fast, his long legs eating up the distance to the reception desk, dragging me along like a naughty child being marched to the principal's office. My hip throbbed with every step, a dull, grinding ache that traveled up my spine. But I didn't wince, not yet. I kept my mouth slightly open, my eyes darting around the room with a practiced look of bewilderment. A woman sat behind the high, curved desk. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun that pulled the skin of her face taut, and she was typing furiously on a keyboard. She didn't look up when we stopped. She just kept typing, her acrylic nails clicking like hail on a tin roof. "Excuse me," Mark said, his voice a little too loud, a little too eager. "I'm Mark Henderson. I'm here to admit my mother, Dolores. We have an appointment with the intake coordinator." The woman stopped typing. She looked at Mark, then she looked at me. Her eyes were flat, devoid of curiosity. She saw an old woman in a gray cardigan, clutching a purse like a lifeline. She saw a number, a bed filler, a monthly check. "Brenda will be right out," she said, pointing a manicured finger toward a heavy oak door to the left. "Just have a seat." We didn't sit. Mark was too agitated to sit. He stood there, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, checking his phone every 30 seconds. I watched him. I watched the way he wouldn't look at me. He was staring at a painting on the wall, a generic watercolor of a sailboat that looked like it had been bought at a garage sale. He was sweating, despite the chill in the room. A fine sheen of perspiration glistened on his upper lip. Guilt? No. Impatience. He had a golf game or a meeting, or perhaps he just wanted to get back to my house to start looking for the jewelry I had hidden in the hollowed-out book in the library. He wouldn't find it. I had moved it to a safety deposit box 3 weeks ago. The heavy door opened and a woman in blue scrubs bustled out. She was wide, with a kind face that felt practiced, like a mask she put on every morning. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Mr. Henderson," she chirped, her voice sickeningly sweet, "and this must be Dolores. Welcome to Green Meadows." She spoke to me at a volume one might use for a jet engine mechanic. I flinched, genuinely this time, and took a half step behind Mark. "Hi," Mark said, extending a hand. "Yes, this is Mom. The paperwork is all done?" "Mostly," Brenda said, beaming. "Just a few signatures from you for the power of attorney confirmation and the liability waivers. We can do that right here." She handed him a pen. A cheap, blue plastic pen. Mark took it. He didn't hesitate. He didn't read the fine print. He pressed the clipboard against the high counter and began to sign. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound was terrible. It was the sound of my life being dismantled. With every loop of his signature, he was stripping me of my autonomy. My right to decide what I ate. My right to walk out the front door. My right to be a person. I watched the ink flow onto the paper, binding me to this place. I felt a scream building in my throat, a primal roar that wanted to shatter the glass doors and bring the ceiling down. I wanted to grab that clipboard and smash it over his head. I wanted to yell. "I changed your diapers. I paid for your college. I held you when your wife left you." But I didn't. Instead, I reached out with a trembling hand and tugged on Mark's sleeve. "Marky," I whispered, using the nickname he hadn't allowed since he was 12. "Marky, did you pay the milkman? He gets angry if we don't leave the money in the bottle." Mark froze mid-signature. The back of his neck went red. He didn't turn around. He just kept writing, faster now. "There is no milkman, Mom," he hissed through gritted teeth. "Just wait a second." Brenda looked at me with that pitying expression I was beginning to hate more than the smell of cabbage. She tilted her head. "Don't you worry, sweetie," she said to me, speaking slowly and enunciating every syllable. "We have plenty of milk here, chocolate and regular." I blinked at her, letting my jaw go slack. "Chocolate?" I repeated, infusing my voice with a childlike wonder that made me want to vomit. "Yes!" Brenda beamed. Mark handed the clipboard back. "Done! Everything is signed." "Great," Brenda said. "Let's get her settled in room 304. It's a lovely room, view of the courtyard." Mark turned to me. This was it, the moment of separation. He looked at his watch again. "Okay, Mom, Brenda is going to take you to your room now. I have to get going. Work, you know." He didn't hug me. He leaned in awkwardly and pecked me on the cheek. His lips were dry. He smelled of fear and expensive cologne. I grabbed his lapel. I made my fingers into a claw, holding on tight, wrinkling his expensive suit jacket. I needed to sell this. I needed him to believe that he was leaving a confused, frightened old woman, not a mother who was memorizing the color of his tie for future reference. "You're leaving?" I quavered, widening my eyes until they watered. "But supper is almost ready. The roast is in the oven." Mark pulled away, prying my fingers off his jacket one by one. "There is no roast, Mom. You're at Green Meadows now, remember?" I let my hand drop to my side, limp. I stared at his shoes. Italian leather. $400. I bought them for him last Christmas. "Oh," I whispered. I forgot." I'll come visit on Sunday, he said, backing away toward the door. I promise. Sunday. He was lying. I could see it in the way his eyes shifted to the exit sign. He wouldn't come on Sunday. He probably wouldn't come for a month. He was escaping. Okay, Marky, I said softly. Be careful crossing the street. He turned and walked away. He didn't look back. Not once. The sliding doors opened for him with a cheerful whoosh, and then he was gone. I watched his silhouette disappear toward the parking lot, and for a split second, the performance faltered. A crack appeared in the facade. I felt a tear, a real, hot, angry tear, roll down the crease of my cheek. It wasn't because I was confused. It was because I was clear, crystal clear. My son had just discarded me. All right, Dolores, Brenda's loud voice snapped me back. Let's go see your new digs. She took my arm. Her grip was firm, professional, impersonal. She began to lead me down the hallway. We passed through a set of double doors that locked behind us with a heavy magnetic clunk. That sound vibrated in my chest. Locked in. The corridor stretched out endlessly, lined with handrails. The floor was polished to a high shine, reflecting the fluorescent lights overhead that buzzed like trapped flies. We passed other residents. A man in a wheelchair sat facing a wall, mumbling to himself about baseball scores from 1955. A woman with wild white hair was shuffling along in her slippers, clutching a baby doll wrapped in a towel. She looked at me with eyes that saw nothing, eyes that had checked out years ago. Is this my family? I asked Brenda, pointing a shaking finger at the woman with the doll. No, honey, these are your neighbors, Brenda said, pulling me along. We walked past the nurses' station, where phones were ringing and lights were blinking. Nobody looked up. We were just cargo being moved from the dock to the hold. Here we are, room 304. Brenda pushed open a door. The room was small. It was divided by a curtain. On the left side, a bed was neatly made with a thin, scratchy-looking blanket. There was a generic wooden dresser and a single chair. On the right side of the curtain, I could hear heavy, wet breathing. You have a roommate, Brenda announced. That's Mrs. Higgins. She's... I stepped into the room. The air here was stale, recycled 1,000 times. I walked over to the empty bed, my bed, and sat down on the edge. The mattress was hard, covered in plastic beneath the sheet. It crunched when I sat. Brenda placed my suitcase on the chair. I'll let you get settled. Dinner is at 5 in the common room. Someone will come get you. The call button is right here if you need anything. Don't try to get up without help, okay? We don't want any falls. She patted my shoulder. Pat, pat, like one pats a dog, and walked out. The door clicked shut. I sat there for a long time. I listened to the raspy breathing of Mrs. Nurses. Higgins on the other side of the curtain. I looked at my hands, resting in my lap. They were wrinkled, spotted with age, the veins blue and prominent, but they were steady. Slowly, very slowly, I straightened my back. I stopped hunching. I lifted my chin. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs, letting the oxygen clear the fog of the performance. I looked around the stark, ugly room. This was my stage now. This was my battlefield. I stood up. My knees popped, but I ignored the pain. I walked over to the window and looked out. I could see the parking lot. I saw Mark's black SUV pulling out onto the main road. He was driving fast. Good, I whispered to the empty room, my voice steady and cold as ice. Run, Marky. Run while you can. I turned back to the suitcase. I needed to unpack. I needed to assess my resources. I unzipped the bag. He had packed my old sweaters, the ones with the moth holes. He had packed my comfortable shoes. But at the bottom, tucked inside a pair of wool socks where he hadn't bothered to look, I felt the hard, rectangular shape of my journal, and next to it, the small, hidden smartphone I had bought with cash 2 months ago, unbeknownst to him. I pulled out the phone. It was off. I turned it on, shielding the screen from the door. 45% battery. I would need to find a place to charge it where the nurses wouldn't see. I sat back down on the plastic-covered mattress. I wasn't Dolores the dementia patient anymore. Not in this room. In this room, I was Dolores Henderson, matriarch, survivor, and a woman with a score to settle. Mrs. Higgins let out a loud snort in her sleep behind the curtain. I looked at the curtain. "Don't worry, dear," I said softly into the gloom. "I'm just passing through." I opened the journal to a fresh page. The paper was smooth and white. I took a pen from my purse. Not a cheap plastic one, but my silver Parker pen that I had slipped into my pocket before leaving the house. I clicked it open. Day 1, I wrote. The subject has delivered the package. The facility is secure, but the staff is complacent. Mark thinks the game is over. He does not realize that the game has just begun. I closed the book. I closed my eyes. And then I let myself weep. Silent, shaking sobs that racked my small body. I cried for the house with the bay window. I cried for the hydrangeas that would die without water. I cried for the little boy with the scraped knee who used to run into my arms, the boy who had grown up to become the man who left me here to rot. I let the grief wash over me like a tidal wave, drowning me for exactly 5 minutes. Then I stopped. I wiped my face with a tissue from my sleeve. I checked my reflection in the small mirror over the dresser. My eyes were red, which was perfect. It fit the character. I heard footsteps in the hall, heavy, squeaky shoes. "Showtime, Dolores," I whispered. I slumped my shoulders. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I began to tremble my hands. When the door opened and a nurse poked her head in to check on me, she didn't see a warrior plotting her revenge. She saw a sad, broken old lady sitting on the edge of a strange bed. "Time for dinner, sweetie," the nurse said. I looked up at her, my eyes vacant and watery. "Dinner?" I asked, my voice quivering. Did my husband call?" "He said he'd be late." The nurse sighed, a tragic, pitying sigh. "Come on, honey, let's get some mashed potatoes." I stood up, leaning heavily on my cane, and shuffled toward the door, entering the role of a lifetime, step by painful step. The dining room at Green Meadows was a symphony of despair conducted in the key of C minor. The nurse, a different one this time, with chewing gum smacking loudly in her molars, guided me to a circular table near the center of the room. The noise was overwhelming. It wasn't the lively chatter of a restaurant or the warm buzz of a family gathering. It was a cacophony of clanking silverware against plastic trays, the screech of chair legs dragging on linoleum, and the low, constant hum of a television mounted high on the wall, blaring a game show that nobody was watching. "Here, sweetie, you sit here next to Mr. Abernathy," the nurse said, pulling out a vinyl chair that was sticky to the touch. I sat. The chair was cold. Mr. Abernathy was a skeletal man with a napkin tucked into his shirt collar. He was staring intently at a bowl of green jello as if it held the secrets of the universe. He didn't look up when I sat down. He just trembled, his spoon rattling against the side of the bowl. I folded my hands in my lap. I kept my head down, chin to chest, adopting the posture of the defeated. It wasn't hard. The weight of what Mark had done, The sheer brutality of his betrayal sat on my shoulders like a wet wool coat. I looked at the table setting. A plastic cup with a sippy lid, a spoon, no knife, no fork. Apparently, I wasn't trusted with tines. A tray was placed in front of me with a wet thud. "Eat up, Dolores," the nurse said, her voice too loud, too cheerful. "It's Salisbury steak night." I looked at the food. A brown oval patty covered in a gelatinous gravy that was already forming a skin. A scoop of mashed potatoes that looked like it had been dispensed from an ice cream scooper. A pile of gray peas. It smelled of salt and institutional hopelessness. I didn't move. I couldn't. My stomach was a knot of acid. "You need help, hon?" the nurse asked, already reaching for my spoon. I flinched. The idea of this stranger, this woman with chipped nail polish and eyes that didn't care, shoving processed meat into my mouth was more than I could bear. I had to act. I had to navigate this without losing my dignity, or what was left of it. I'm waiting for my son," I whispered, looking up at her with wide, wet eyes. "Marky, he said he'd be right back. He went to get the car." The nurse rolled her eyes. A small, subtle motion, but I saw it. I saw everything. "He's gone home, Dolores. You need to eat." I picked up the spoon with a shaking hand. "I can do it," I quavered. I'm a big girl." "That's the spirit," she said, patting my head again, before bustling away to wipe drool off another resident's chin. I sat there, stirring the cold gravy, listening to the sounds of 70 people eating their final years away. I felt a tear slide down my nose. This wasn't acting. This was the reality sinking in. My bay window. My books. My garden. All gone. Traded for a plastic cup and a son who wanted his inheritance early. That is when I felt the eyes. It is a sensation you learn to recognize when you spend 40 years on a stage. The feeling of being watched. Not casually glanced at, but studied, scrutinized. It pricked the hairs on the back of my neck. I didn't look up immediately. I kept stirring the potatoes, counting to 5 in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then, slowly, I lifted my gaze, letting my eyes drift aimlessly around the room before locking onto the source. Standing near the double doors leading to the kitchen was a man. He wasn't wearing scrubs. He wore a tweed jacket with leather patches on the elbows, a white shirt, and a tie that was slightly askew. He held a tablet in one hand, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at me. He was older than the staff, maybe late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and thick, dark eyebrows that shadowed deep-set, intelligent eyes. He didn't look tired like the nurses. He looked sharp, predatory almost. He saw me looking. Most people would have looked away, embarrassed to be caught staring. He didn't. He held my gaze across the room, his expression unreadable. I quickly looked back down at my peas, feigning confusion. I started mumbling to myself, a practiced monologue of nonsense. "The blue ones go in the basket. Yes, the blue ones. Don't forget the starch." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him start to walk. He was coming toward my table. His stride was purposeful. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this the doctor Mark had paid off? The one who signed the papers declaring me incompetent without even a proper exam? He pulled up a chair across from me. He didn't ask permission. He just sat, placing the tablet on the sticky table. "Mrs. Henderson?" he asked. His voice was a baritone, smooth and commanding. I kept my eyes on the peas. I let my hand tremble so hard the spoon clattered against the plastic tray. "Who are you?" Did Marky send you? I'm Dr. Thorne, he said. I'm the new geriatric psychiatrist here. I just wanted to welcome you to Green Meadows. I looked up at him, squinting as if I couldn't quite bring him into focus. A doctor? I asked, my voice rising in pitch to mimic anxiety. I don't need a doctor. I'm fine. I want to go home. He didn't offer the usual platitudes. He didn't say, "You are home now," or "Don't worry, dear." He just watched me. He looked at my hands. He looked at the way I was holding the spoon. "Your file says you have advanced Alzheimer's, doctor," Thorne said, his tone conversational, almost casual, mixed with vascular dementia, rapid onset. I nodded eagerly, playing the part. Yes, my head. It gets fuzzy, like clouds. Mark says I forget things. I forgot the stove. I burned the roast. Dr. Thorne leaned back in his chair. He tapped a finger against the edge of his tablet. That's interesting, he said, because you're holding that spoon with a pincer grasp, very precise. And when the tray fell in the kitchen a moment ago, the loud crash, you didn't startle. You didn't exhibit the Moro reflex common in patients with your level of cognitive decline. You just paused. My blood ran cold. He was good. He was very good. I dropped the spoon. It fell into the gravy with a wet plop. I let my mouth hang open. I don't like the noise, I whined. It hurts my ears. He leaned in closer. I could smell coffee and old paper on him. Tell me, Mrs. Henderson, he said softly, what was your profession before? I blinked. Housewife, I said automatically. I took care of Marky and my husband, Robert. I cleaned, I cooked. Dr. Thorne glanced at his tablet, then back at me. A small, tight smile played on his lips. It wasn't a nice smile. The intake forms say you were a housewife, but I did a little digging. We have a Google alert for new residents, just to get a sense of who they were. There was a Dolores Henderson, who taught dramatic arts at the university for 30 years. A Dolores Henderson who directed a critically acclaimed production of Death of a Salesman in 1998. He paused, letting the information hang in the air between us like a guillotine blade. Is that you, Dolores? Panic flared in my chest. If he knew I was sane, he could ruin everything. Or could he help me? No, I couldn't trust him. He worked for the prison. If I revealed myself now, Mark would just say I was having a lucid day, or that I was lying. I needed more time. I needed proof of Mark's theft before I dropped the mask. I widened my eyes until they hurt. I stared past him at the wall. I acted in the church play once, I whispered, clutching my cardigan tight around my neck. I was a sheep. Bah. Dr. Thorne stared at me for a long, agonizing minute. He was looking for the crack. He was looking for the intelligence behind the cataracts. I pushed it down deep. I summoned every ounce of training I had. I became the fog. I became the void. Finally, he sighed. He picked up his tablet. You're very convincing, Mrs. Henderson, he murmured, almost to himself. He stood up. Enjoy your steak. He turned to walk away, but then he stopped. He looked back at me over his shoulder. By the way, he said, his voice low, your son called. He wanted to make sure you were sedated for the night. He said you can get violent. Violent. The word hung there. Mark was setting the stage for me to be drugged, to be turned into a zombie so I couldn't fight back. I gripped the edge of the table. The plastic cut into my palms. I didn't look at Dr. Thorne. I looked at the gray peas. Mark is a good boy, I said, my voice flat, dead. He loves his mother. Dr. Thorne didn't leave immediately. He stood there, watching me. "I'm not going to authorize the sedation, Dolores," he said quietly. "Not tonight. I want to see what you do when the lights go out." And with that, he walked away, his tweed jacket disappearing into the crowd of nurses. I sat there, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He suspected. He knew something was wrong with the narrative. He wasn't an ally yet, but he was a variable. A dangerous, intelligent variable. I looked down at the Salisbury steak. I picked up the spoon again. I forced a bite into my mouth. It tasted like cardboard and salt, but I swallowed it. I needed the calories. I needed the strength. Because tonight, I wasn't going to sleep. Tonight, I had work to do. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the next table. A woman, Mrs. Higgins, my roommate, knocked her water cup over. It splashed onto the floor. She started to cry, a high, thin wail of distress. "Oh no! Oh no! My dress!" A nurse, the one with the gum, sighed loudly from 3 tables away. "Hold your horses, Higgins. I'm coming." She wasn't coming fast enough. Mrs. Higgins was hyperventilating, her hands flapping in panic. Without thinking, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a clean tissue, one I had saved from my purse. I leaned over. "Here," I said, my voice dropping its quiver for a split second. "It's just water. It dries. Look." I dabbed at her sleeve efficiently. I caught the water before it soaked through to her skin. I squeezed her hand firmly. A mother's touch. A calm, authoritative touch. "Look at me," I commanded softly. "Breathe. In, out." Mrs. Higgins looked at me. Her panic subsided. She took a breath. "Thank you," she whispered. You're kind." I realized what I had done. I froze. I looked up. Across the room, near the exit, Dr. Thorne was still there. He hadn't left. He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. He had seen it. He had seen the speed, the empathy, the competence. He raised one thick eyebrow at me. Just one. A silent message. "I saw you." I quickly pulled my hand away from Mrs. Higgins. I hunched my shoulders. I went back to staring at my Jell-O. The game had elevated. It wasn't just me against Mark anymore. It was me against the doctor's keen eye. And I realized, with a jolt of adrenaline that made me feel 20 years younger, that I welcomed it. Let him watch. Let him study me. Because when the curtain finally fell on this tragedy, I was going to make sure Dr. Thorne was sitting in the front row, applauding my performance as I burned Mark's world to the ground. I took another bite of the gray meat. It tasted like fuel. The night shift at Green Meadows was a different kind of prison. During the day, the noise was a distraction, a chaotic cover for my observations. But at night, the silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic squeak of rubber soles on linoleum and the occasional, heart-wrenching cry for a mother who had been dead for 50 years. I lay in bed, the sheets stiff with industrial starch, listening to Mrs. Higgins whistle through her nose. It was 2 a.m., the witching hour for the old and the forgotten. Slowly, ensuring the rustle of the bedding was masked by Mrs. Higgins' snoring, I pulled the blanket over my head. I created a small, suffocating tent of privacy. My heart hammered against my ribs, a fragile bird trapped in a cage of bone. I reached into the wool sock hidden in my suitcase, which I had slid under the bed earlier, and retrieved the smartphone. The screen lit up my face with a ghostly blue glow. I squinted, my eyes adjusting. I didn't need reading glasses. I had LASIK surgery 10 years ago, a vanity I never told Mark about. He thought I was blind as a bat. I had one goal tonight. I needed to see the damage. My fingers, usually so graceful on a piano keys, felt clumsy as I navigated to the banking app. Incorrect password. My hands shook. Calm down, Dolores. You played Lady Macbeth. You can remember a 6-digit code. I breathed out, steadied my thumb, and typed it again. Access granted. I stared at the screen. The numbers swam before me, not because of my vision, but because of the sheer violence of what I saw. 0. The checking account. 0. The savings account, the one Robert and I had built for 30 years, intended for travel, for emergencies, for grandchildren. 0. Transfer to MH Holdings LLC, Mark Henderson. A silent scream rose in my throat, burning like bile. I swallowed it down. He hadn't just taken control, he had drained me dry. He had left me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a fake diagnosis. I switched apps. I went to the local real estate listings. I knew Mark. He was impatient, he was greedy, he wouldn't wait. And there it was, my home, 42 Oak Street, listed 6 hours ago. The photos tore through me like shrapnel. There was my living room, stripped of the Persian rug, my library, with the shelves empty, looking like gaping mouths. The caption read, "Charming fixer-upper, priced for quick sale, estate condition." Fixer-upper? My sanctuary, the place where I nursed Rogert through his cancer, the place where I graded thousands of papers, the place where I taught Mark how to tie his shoes. Estate condition. That's code for dead person's house. I was still breathing, and he was already burying me. I shut off the phone, plunging myself back into darkness. The tears came then, hot and fast. I bit my knuckle to keep from sobbing aloud. The betrayal was a physical pain, a knife twisting in my gut. How did I raise a wolf? I had loved him. I had given him everything. The door handle turned. I froze. I shoved the phone under my pillow and squeezed my eyes shut. I let my mouth slacken, my breathing turning shallow and rasping. The door opened. A beam of light from the hallway cut across the floor. "Mrs. Henderson?" It wasn't the nurse with the gum. It was the baritone voice, Dr. Thorne. I didn't move. I kept my rhythm steady. "Drop it, Dolores. I saw the light under the blanket." My eyes snapped open. I lay there for a second, calculating. If I denied it, he'd search the bed. He'd find the phone. He'd confiscate it. I would lose my lifeline. I slowly sat up. I didn't hunch. I didn't tremble. I sat up with the regal posture of a queen addressing a usurper. "You work late, doctor," I said. My voice was crisp, no quaver, no dementia. "Doctor." Thorne stepped into the room and closed the door softly behind him, plunging us into semi-darkness again. He didn't turn on the overhead light. He walked to the foot of my bed and sat in the visitor's chair. He looked tired. The shadows under his eyes were deep. "I don't sleep well," he said simply, "especially when I have a puzzle I can't solve." He looked at me, really looked at me. "I called your son an hour ago," he said. My hands clenched the blanket. "And?" "I told him I had concerns about your diagnosis. I told him that, in my professional opinion, the symptoms didn't match the clinical presentation of advanced Alzheimer's. I told him you were too alert, too coordinated." I waited, my breath caught in my throat. "And what did Marky say?" I asked, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. Dr. Thorne leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He got angry, very angry. He told me to stay in my lane. He threatened to sue the facility if I didn't follow the treatment plan. Specifically, the heavy sedation at night. I let out a bitter, dry laugh. Of course he did. If I'm awake, I'm dangerous. Dr. Thorne nodded slowly. But then I said something else to him. I told him, "Mr. Henderson, your mother doesn't have Alzheimer's." I stared at him. "You said that?" I did. There was a silence on the line you could have driven a truck through. And then he said, "Just keep her quiet, doctor." The brutality of it hung in the air between us. Mark didn't care about the truth. He just wanted me erased. Thorne stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the same parking lot I had watched Mark flee from earlier. "I looked up your record again, Dolores. Not the medical one, the public one. I watched a clip on YouTube. You accepting a regional theater award in 2005. Your speech was formidable. You spoke about how the truth is the only weapon an actor has." He turned back to face me. "I'm not going to sedate you, Dolores, and I'm not going to revise my diagnosis to fit his narrative, but you need to know something." "What?" I whispered. "He has power of attorney, a medical proxy. Legally, he controls you. If I push too hard, he moves you tomorrow. He moves you to a state facility where the doctors are too overworked to notice that the old lady in room 304 is actually reciting Shakespeare under her breath, and you will disappear." Fear, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. So what do I do? Dr. Thorne walked back to the bed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. It wasn't a business card. It was a key card, an electronic pass for the facility doors. He placed it on the nightstand right next to my water cup. "You act," he said intensely. "You give the performance of your life. You make him believe he's won. You make him feel safe enough to get sloppy." Because men like Mark, men who think they are the smartest person in the room, they always get sloppy. He looked at the pillow where my phone was hidden. "Keep your phone hidden. Document everything. Dates, times, missed medications, conversations. Build a case. I will be your witness on the inside, but you have to be the soldier." "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling, this time with genuine emotion. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me." Dr. Thorne's face softened, the hard lines around his mouth relaxing. "My mother," he said quietly, "she had dementia, the real kind. It took her piece by piece for 10 years. It's a cruel thief of a disease. To fake it? To use that suffering as a cover for greed?" His eyes hardened again, turning into dark flint. "That offends me, Mrs. Henderson. It offends me deeply." He turned to the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow I'm going to prescribe you a placebo pill. It's just sugar. You take it in front of the nurses." You stumble, you slur your words, you drool if you have to. We need the staff to report back to Mark that you are declining rapidly. We need him to lower his guard." I nodded. I understood. The stage was set. The director had given his notes. "Thank you, doctor," I said. He paused at the door. "Don't thank me yet. The hardest part is coming. You have to let him sell the house. You have to let him think it's over. You have to endure the loss of everything you own so you can keep the one thing he can't take." "My mind?" I asked. "Your vengeance," he said. The door clicked shut. I sat alone in the dark. I reached under the pillow and touched the cool glass of the phone. I thought of the house on Oak Street. I thought of my rose bushes. I thought of the height chart penciled on the kitchen doorframe, marking Mark's growth year by year. I closed my eyes and visualized a match, a single, striking match. "Let him sell the house," I whispered to the empty room. "It's just wood and brick." I wasn't a housewife anymore. I wasn't a teacher. I was the lead role in a tragedy that was about to become a revenge thriller. And as I laid my head back on the pillow, I didn't cry. I began to rehearse my lines for the morning. "Where is my oatmeal? I want my oatmeal." I smiled in the dark. It was a terrifying smile. Marky had no idea who he had locked in here. He thought he had buried his mother. He was about to find out he had buried a landmine. The morning sun didn't rise so much as it bled into the room, a pale, sickly yellow that highlighted the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air. I watched them from my bed, my body rigid, my mind racing at 100 miles an hour, while my face remained a mask of slack-jawed vacancy. Today was the opening night. At 8 a.m., the nurse with the gum, whose name tag read Brenda, bustled in with a little paper cup. "Time for your meds, sweetie," she said, her voice too loud, the way people speak to children or the deaf. I sat up slowly, letting my head loll slightly to the left. I blinked at her, unfocused. Is it time for church?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough. Brenda sighed, popping her gum. "No, honey, it's Tuesday. Take your pill. Dr. Thorne changed your dosage, said this will help with the agitation." I looked at the small white pill in the cup, the placebo, the sugar pill. I reached for it with a hand I forced to shake. I missed the cup on the first try, my fingers grasping at air. Brenda clicked her tongue. "Here, let me." She tipped the cup into my mouth. The pill dissolved instantly, sweet and chalky. I swallowed and let a small trickle of saliva escape the corner of my mouth. I didn't wipe it away. "Good girl," Brenda said, wiping my chin with a rough paper towel. "You're in a mood today, aren't you? Out of it." Perfect. The review was in. The audience bought it. By noon, the stage was set. I was sitting in the visitors' lounge, a room that smelled of stale coffee and despair, wearing a floral dress that I had buttoned incorrectly on purpose. Dr. Thorne stood near the nurse's station, pretending to read a file, but I felt his eyes on me, my silent partner. Then the automatic doors slid open. Mark walked in. He looked like $1 million, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. He checked his watch, a Rolex I had never seen before, and scanned the room with a look of distaste. When his eyes landed on me, he didn't smile. He grimaced, just for a microsecond, but I saw it. He saw a withered old woman, a burden, a loose end. I saw a target. My phone was tucked inside the pocket of my cardigan, the voice memo app recording. I had started it 5 minutes ago. "Mom?" he said, approaching me. He put on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a shark's smile. I looked up at him, keeping my eyes wide and empty. "Robert?" I whispered. "You're home early. Did you get the milk?" Mark sighed, a heavy, dramatic exhale for the benefit of anyone watching. "No, Mom. It's Mark. Your son. Dad's been dead for years, remember?" I shrank back into the chair, clutching my purse. Dead? No, he was just here. He was fixing the sink. Mark pulled up a chair and sat close. Too close. He smelled of expensive leather and ambition. He placed a thick manila envelope on the low table between us. "Mom, listen to me. We have to handle some business. The doctors say," he lowered his voice, glancing around, "the doctors say you're getting worse. You need better care, more expensive care." I rocked back and forth slightly. Expensive? Money? No money. "Exactly," Mark said, his voice smooth like oil. "That's why I'm here to help. I found a buyer for the house on Oak Street, a cash offer. It's a great deal, Mom. We can put the money in your account to pay for all of this." He swept his hand around the depressing room as if he were doing me a favor. I looked at the envelope. My house, my sanctuary, the garden where I had buried 3 family dogs, the kitchen where I had cried when Robert died. He wanted to liquidate my life into a check he could cash. I don't want to move, I whined, pitching my voice high and thin. I want to go home. You can't go home, Mom, he snapped, then caught himself. He softened his tone, but the venom remained. You can't live there alone. You leave the stove on. You forget who you are. This is for your own good. He pulled a pen from his pocket, a Mont Blanc, heavy black resin. He uncapped it and slid a document in front of me. It was the deed transfer. Just sign here, Mom, right next to the sticky note. Then I can take care of everything. I looked at the paper. The letters swam before me, not because I couldn't read them, but because of the tears pricking my eyes. This was the moment, the point of no return. If I signed, I lost the house. If I didn't, he would know I was lucid enough to resist. I had to lose the battle to win the war. I reached for the pen. I let my hand hover over the paper. Will this make Robert come back? I asked softly. Mark paused. He looked at me, and for a second, I wondered if there was any of my sweet boy left in there, the boy who used to bring me dandelions. Yes, Mom, he lied. He didn't even blink. If you sign this, everything will be okay. Dad would want you to sign it. The cruelty of it took my breath away. He was using my dead husband, his own father, as leverage. Dr. Thorne walked over then. He stood behind Mark. Mr. Henderson, he said, his voice neutral, your mother is having a difficult day. The new medication protocol makes her quite suggestible. Are you sure this is the right time for legal matters? Mark spun around, his face flushing red. I told you to stay out of this, he hissed. She's having a moment of clarity. She knows what she's doing. Right, Mom? He turned back to me, his eyes pleading, desperate. Not for love, but for the signature. Sign it, Mom. Be a good girl. I looked at Dr. Thorne. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. Do it. I gripped the pen. I felt the cold resin against my skin. I channeled every ounce of grief, every ounce of rage, and I poured it into my hand. I am a good girl, I mumbled. I pressed the pen to the paper. I wrote Dolores Henderson. The signature was shaky, jagged, an old woman's scrawl, but it was legal. I dropped the pen. It clattered onto the table. There, I said, breathless. I did it. Can I have my oatmeal now? Mark snatched the paper away as if it were gold bullion. He checked the signature, a greedy grin spreading across his face. He shoved the papers back into the envelope and stood up. Yes, Mom, you did great. Excellent. He didn't hug me. He didn't touch me. He just tapped the envelope against his palm. I have to go file this. I'll come back. Soon. Maybe next week. He turned to Dr. Thorne, buttoning his jacket. See, she's fine. She knows what's best. Keep her comfortable, doctor, and keep her heavily medicated at night. I don't want any more phone calls about her wandering. Mark turned and walked toward the exit. He walked with a bounce in his step. He had won. He had the house. He had the money. He had put the old mare out to pasture. I watched him go. I watched the automatic doors swallow him whole. The silence that followed was heavy. Dr. Thorne sat down in the chair Mark had vacated. He looked at the empty table. You just gave him a $500,000 asset, he said quietly. I stopped rocking. I stopped shaking. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the phone. I stopped the recording. No, doctor, I said. my voice dropping an octave, returning to the rich, commanding contralto that had once silenced auditoriums. I didn't give him an asset. I gave him the evidence. I looked at Dr. Thorne, my eyes dry and clear. He just coerced a woman he claims has severe dementia into signing away her estate, on tape, after being warned by a medical professional that she was under the influence of mind-altering drugs. And he lied about my dead husband to do it. I tapped the phone screen. In the state of New York, that's not just elder abuse. That's fraud. That's grand larceny. And once he sells that house and moves the money, that's wire fraud. I looked out the window where Mark's car was pulling away. He thinks I have Alzheimer's, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. But he forgot that before I was a mother, before I was a wife, I was a director, and I know exactly how a tragedy ends. Dr. Thorne looked at me, a mixture of awe and fear in his eyes. "What do we do now?" he asked. I leaned back, smoothing the front of my dress. Now we wait for the check to clear. We let him spend a little. We let him feel safe. And while he's picking out curtains for his new life, I'm going to write the third act. I stood up, my legs strong, my posture straight. The fog was gone. The clouds had parted. I looked at the doctor. My son put me in a nursing home because he thought I was acting. He was right, but he didn't check the playbill. I'm not the victim in this show, doctor. I walked toward the hallway, the sound of my sensible shoes clicking like a ticking clock on the linoleum. I'm the villain, and it's time for my monologue.